Hello and welcome to the Dear Fellow Black Single Mom podcast. I am your host, Cass, and I want to thank you so much for tuning in. This is our very first episode and I'm super excited. I've been wanting to do this podcast for a very, very long time, but honestly, I came up with 1,000,001 reasons as to why I couldn't do it. And now I was like, you know what? Let me stop making the excuses and just do this. And really, this podcast is my letter to other Black single moms out there because I am a Black single mom and I have a 1.5-year-old who is amazing. He is a handful at times, lots of energy, but in general, a really great person. And I wanted to share my journey of being a Black single mom. I also wanted to meet other Black single moms and build a community. And so that's some of the things that I'm hoping will happen as we grow and as I continue to record these episodes. I also when I first made the decision to go through with my pregnancy, I went to the internet to try to find some encouragement because I knew that the journey that I was about to embark on was not going to be easy by any means, but I knew that for me, at least, it was the right thing to do and it was right for me. So unfortunately, when I went to go look online for encouragement, I didn't see any. Instead, I was met with a lot of vitriol and just a lot of people bashing Black single mothers in particular, not white single mothers, but Black single mothers in particular. And I was like, I know there are other Black single moms out there who are living their best lives and who still are living a life that they want and that's fulfilling, because the narrative usually is that once you become a Black single mom, you're just going to be struggling. You're going to have to give up all of your goals and all of your dreams, and it's all going to be about your kids. And I was like, I know that, of course, I'm going to prioritize my son, but I also don't feel like I have to give up everything and give up who I am in order to be a mom. And so I just wanted to capture my journey. And I feel like, this will be a great way to have some accountability for some of the things that I want to do and share my goals with you all, but also sharing my story about the things that I have already gone through and that I've learned and the things that I've overcome, because there have been some challenges and the things that I've been able to enjoy about the journey as well. And so I thank you so much for tuning in. I really, really hope that you guys will keep tuning in. I'm going to try my best to be consistent and at least start with posting bi-weekly. And we'll see how that goes. But I'm really, really excited. And so for the first episode 1, I wanted to talk about my pregnancy and just everything that I went through with figuring out how to prepare for my child. And once I had made the decision to keep my son and just everything leading up to that moment. And so it's 2020, woo woo, and I met the father of my son in 2017. And for some background, during that time of my life, I was lost. I'll be honest. I was not in a terrible space, but I was really in a space of transition. And I mention that because at that point in my life, I thought that I had done enough work on myself to enter into a relationship, but really I wasn't. I wasn't in the place where I should have been dating, but it had been 1.5 years since my last relationship, almost 2 years. And so I was like, I think I'm ready. Of not realizing you're actually in a season of transition and you should finish going through your transition before you welcome someone else into your journey. But, I didn't do that. So, when I met him, everything moved really fast and it just seemed like we were the perfect fit and we got along. And it was, obviously the honeymoon phase where it's of course, everything seems really great in the beginning and everything seems like you're just gonna last forever. And, There's other things that I'll probably talk about in another episode. But that honestly should have been a red flag to me, that everything was moving so fast, because I didn't want things to move as fast as they were. It was more so him prompting, but I went along with it, and so I blame myself for that. I can only blame myself. And there are other red flags that started to pop up, but I ignored them because the first month or two that we were together, like, everything was so great. And I held on so long to that, to everything is so great and everything will just go back to that honeymoon phase, because there's just this transition that we're going through and things are just rough right now, but they're gonna go back to the way that they were. And again, the red flags are probably things that I would want to talk about in a separate episode, but I proceeded anyways with the relationship, and unbeknownst to me, I got pregnant in November of 2017. And we had talked about it, about having family in the future, but it wasn't something that I was like, oh, I want to do right away, right now. But when I got pregnant, I didn't, obviously I didn't know. And during that time, I was actually moving to my own place for the first time. I finally had gotten my own apartment. And for any of you guys who are Haitian, or your family's from the Caribbean, staying and living with your parents into your 30s until you get married is quite common. And so that's honestly what my parents wanted me to do. They wanted me to stay and live with them until I got married. But I got to a point where I was just I really want that independence. I want to be able to have that freedom. I want to live in the city. I want to experience what it's like to just be able to get in my car and drive 5 minutes to go to an event or meet up with my friends. I just wanted that, because for most of my teenage years and my adult years up until that point, I lived in the suburbs. And so whenever friends invited me to go somewhere, it was a whole journey and process where I had to figure out, parking and traffic and driving into the city. And I kid you not, it was taking me 2 hours to drive into work and 2 hours to drive out. So I also was looking forward to a shorter commute. But again, while I'm moving, I have no idea that I'm pregnant. And so it wasn't until maybe 3 weeks after I had moved in that I started to have symptoms of being pregnant, but I didn't know what they were necessarily. I didn't know that they were related to me being pregnant. I just thought oh, maybe I'm coming down with a cold or something. I'll just let it play itself out and eventually I'll get better and everything will be okay. So I didn't pay too much mind. But then I think it was probably a week after the symptoms started that I finally decided to take a pregnancy test, and the results, it's funny when I think about it now, but basically the results were inconclusive. I couldn't tell whether or not I was pregnant based on that pregnancy test. So instead of taking another, I was just well, that must mean that I'm not pregnant. And I just continued with my life. I think I took it in the morning before I went to work or something. And I just was okay, I'm not going to think about this. I'm just going to go on about my day. And then around this time, so December of 2017, I just finally moved into an apartment in the city. I had one other roommate, but it was perfect. It was a really nice apartment, close to the airport, right in the thick of things. And it was a really great deal. But also during this time, me and the father of my child broke up. And At that point in time, I had a lot of feelings for him, so I wanted things to work out, and I was heartbroken. And it sucked because it was like I finally accomplished this goal of mine of like moving out of my parents' house and being on my own. But I didn't even feel like I could really fully enjoy it because I was also going through a breakup, and now I was having all these weird symptoms and I didn't know what was going on. So I couldn't really enjoy this accomplishment as much as I wanted. And then because the holidays were coming up around this time too, I, was still going through my breakup. I didn't want to be alone. So I like randomly decided, you know what? I'm going to go visit my best friend in California. So I literally bought a ticket the 2 days before I left. I texted her like, hey girl, I'm coming to visit you. Again, I didn't know I was pregnant, but I knew that something was up because when I was flying over to LA, like the flight over and there, like was terrible. I had terrible morning sickness the whole entire time. I didn't know that's what it was, but later on discovered that that's what it was. And I was just like, I've never had problems with flying. I don't know what's going on, but I definitely was happy that I did go to LA because I just couldn't imagine being in the city and spending the holidays alone when originally I had planned to spend the holidays with my ex at the time. So it was definitely me running away from my problems, but at the time I was just like, I need something that's different. I need a space where I don't have to think about all the things that are not going right in my life right now. But little did I know exactly how many more things were going to change, because then while I was over there, like I did have a nice Christmas and I enjoyed it. I like got to go to the beach on Christmas Day. It was really nice. I enjoyed having the warm weather and just laughing and joking around with my best friend. I decided to go back a little bit earlier, and when I went back, that's when I finally did take another pregnancy test. And I took 2 pregnancy tests, and they were both positive for me being pregnant. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, I had a lot of different emotions when I found out. Like, I remember literally my breath being taken away from me. Like, I could not breathe. I was just like, what? I'm really pregnant? Like, I'm actually pregnant? I have a life inside of me? I couldn't believe it. And I think the most clear emotion I felt was fear and confusion. I didn't know, like, how would I take care of this baby if I were to have my son? At the time, I didn't know I was going to have a son, but how was I going to take care of a baby? I just finally moved out. I have rent to pay now. I don't have, a ton of money saved up. I'm barely able to, get by myself. My income from my job is literally just enough for me and my expenses. And so there were a lot of things that I was thinking about, and this was towards the very end of December. And I remember after that day when I found out, like, everything changed. And of course, the father of my child knew. I let him know what was going on. But January came, and I remember January of 2018 being so depressed. I fell into a very deep depression. And part of it was because I knew I had a big decision I had to make, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was afraid of making this decision and just how much life would change, because I knew that no matter what, like, I was not going to be the same person that I was. And it felt like life just got really, really real. And I ended up booking, I think, a total of 3 abortion appointments. And I never thought that I would have ever considered abortion. But at the time, I considered abortion because I just financially didn't feel like I could take care of a baby on my own. I wasn't with the father of my child during that time, and I was afraid to raise a child by myself and be a Black single mom. And it was just not knowing how that really made me feel like I can't do this because I don't know how to do this. I've never done this. And then a part of me felt shame and guilt too, because I do come from a very traditional Haitian family. And what my parents wanted for me was to, get married, buy the house, have the kids. They wanted that trajectory for my life. And not just my parents, but really my family. My family viewed me in that way as kind of like the golden child, if you will. And so I knew that there would be a lot of judgment and just a lot of negativity in some sense thrown my way over this decision if I decided to keep the baby. So I spent a good 3 weeks just going back and forth. 1 minute I was like, no, I'm not going to have an abortion. The next minute I was like, yes, I am going to have an abortion. But I think the other part of it too was how will having an abortion change me? Because I did feel like if I have an abortion, I'm not going to be the same. There's a part of me that's going to be lost forever. And I was afraid of that too. And, I'll never know what would have happened if I went through with the abortion. But I just felt the sense I could possibly lose myself if I go through this abortion. And that is just my own feeling. I'm not saying that that's how everybody else feels. Any woman who's ever been faced with this decision, it's a tough decision, and you don't get there it's just the easiest thing you can choose to do. It weighs heavy, and it weighed heavy on me for 3 weeks. And during those 3 weeks, I didn't talk to my friends. I didn't see anybody. All I could have the strength to do was roll out of bed, shower, and go to work. And I barely ate. I probably would have bowls and bowls of cereal, literally, because I just didn't have the strength to do anything else. And finally, I think it was the third weekend in January, a friend of mine invited me to go to her church. And this was the last appointment that I could book. I had booked an abortion appointment for the following Saturday. So this was the absolute last day that I could go if I wanted to terminate the pregnancy. And so I told her maybe I would come. I would let her know in the morning. And that morning came, and I was like, am I going to go to my abortion appointment, or am I going to go to church? Thankfully, I decided to go to church, and I'm really happy that I did, because when I went to church, I got confirmation from God that I need to go through with my pregnancy. And that day, I finally truly made up my mind that I was going to go through with my pregnancy. And I don't regret that decision. And I do feel that for me, it was the right decision. I know that that's not necessarily what every person who's faced with this decision should do. But for me, it was. And having that confirmation when I went to church, knowing I had been praying to God throughout those 3 weeks of my depression. I am a Christian, so my faith is something that's important to me. But at the time, it was also hard to talk to God, because I was just kind of why me, God? Why? I mean, I knew why, right? I knew how I got myself into this position, but I was also why? Why am I being called to motherhood? I don't think I'm ready. I don't think this is the time, I was going back and forth with God. And when I went to church that day, though, and I finally made up in my mind to go through with my pregnancy, I felt such relief. And it was a kind of peace that knows no understanding. And honestly, that just finally let me feel free, because for those 3 weeks since I found out that I was pregnant, I was weighed down heavily, and it was so hard for me to do anything. And it was a miserable 3 weeks. And so finally, I made that decision. I booked an appointment, and at the time, me and the father of my child, we were not really talking. So I let him know. I left him a message like, hey, I have my first appointment on this day. If you want to come with me, then you're welcome to. Here's the information, all of that jazz. And things just, proceeded to move forward from that day on. But I just remember finally feeling free once I finally made that decision to keep my child. And I am surprised because of the journey that has happened. So many things has happened that I will, be talking about as we continue the podcast. But it's been amazing to me because I do remember once I made the decision to keep my son, I remember praying to God, you have to help me provide for him. You have to help me take care of him because I cannot do this on my own. And so you're giving me a blessing, but this is going to be hard. And I don't have the tools. I don't have the resources. I don't have, the community necessarily. I need you to help me through this. And so it's been amazing to see how God really has allowed me to have the resources, the people, the physical things that you need to care for a child, to just have everything. I could have never, ever predicted how things would have played out. It was not easy though to get to this point, but it's been amazing because now I can say, God is my provider, because he has provided for me and my son in seasons where I truly didn't know how things were going to play out, and, I definitely want to share more of that in this podcast, but that is basically the story of how I got pregnant and also how I finally got to the point where I made my decision to keep my baby. And there will be more episodes to come, but I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in to episode number 1. And I hope to see you in the next episode as well. Peace.